What's going on, Neon Nation? Welcome back to the Neon Arcade for a Cyberpunk 2077 and Cyberpunk 2020 lore video. In today's video, we'll be talking about America and the United States in the world of 2020, from the environment and weather, to the government, to the state of some of the cities, and the events that have led up to 2020 that sets up the world for Cyberpunk Red and 2077. This is taken from the Night City sourcebook, which you can find on Talsorianstore.com. America in 2020 isn't the drug and gang infested hellhole many will have you believe it is, but it also isn't the oasis of opportunity that the corporates will claim either. In reality, America in 2020 is more nuanced than this and is faced with a multitude of challenges and changes. First up, let's look at the environment and landscape of the pre-2020 era in the United States. During the last 30 or so years, numerous ecological disasters have wreaked havoc on the United States infrastructure. Global warming has melted the caps, resulting in a higher sea level, and large parts of the East Coast and the South are now underwater or swampland. Rising temperatures due to this global warming have thawed out southern Alaska, central Canada, and the upper US. These areas are the new breadbasket areas with their rich soil and advantageous climate, producing farmlands with bioengineered grain that supports and stabilizes much of the US economy. Global warming, however, has shriveled up the Great Plains and Southwest, which have turned them into expansive deserts with furious sandstorms and screeching winds. Over the past 20 years, the Pacific Northwest region has had to contend with drought-stricken forests and a lack of water. From Seattle all the way up to San Diego, water is a precious but lacking commodity. In Los Angeles, the shifting ocean current has rerouted rainfall from the central coast, resulting in dense ground fogs mixing with smog to create an acidic noxious gas over the LA basin. San Diego has experienced a similar shift, resulting in a desert city. Night City, straddling the line between NorCal and SoCal, gets the culmination of everything: sweltering dry summers and cool dry winters with periodic acid rainstorms and choking poison ground smogs. Sloppy pollution controls in the latter half of the 20th century has left a dent in the environment. Massive acid rainfalls hammer the Midwest, poisoning drinking water and crops. Two entire regions of the eastern seaboard are wasteland as power companies have abandoned nuclear reactors during the collapse, leaving their toxic contents to leak into the water table. Rock strikes from the ESA's lunar-based mass drivers have decimated Tampa and Colorado Springs and have churned up millions of tons of dust and heat into the atmosphere to aggravate global warming. Ocean life has been hit hard as well due to the dumping of medical wastes from years of the wasting plague. Marine mammals, fish, and phytoplankton necessary to replenish Earth's oxygen supply have all but died off. Plagues have also dramatically impacted America. The AIDS epidemic of the 1990s evolved into the AIDS crisis of the early 2000s. Political infighting stalled researchers from finding a cure, leading to the mutation of AIDS to a more lethal form. The wasting plague, a bioweapon developed by several Arab nations, further reduced the population to 195 million people. Next up, let's look at the government. The United States is pretty much a nation in name only. The executive branch is the only effective part of the federal government, and it controls the military. It's governed by a variety of advisors and appointed agency heads. For the last 3 administrations, the president has been chosen in a back room, since only 12.6% of the US population even bothers to vote anymore. California, Texas, Utah, Alaska, and Nevada are free states and can essentially set up their own rules and laws. The Supreme Court has no influence on the laws of the United States, and local law supersedes federal law. Congress in the US has the ability to legislate US business and trade law, which affect international corporations operating in the US, banking law, communication and transportation law, and tariffs. It's a lucrative position, and international megacorps trade cash favors for legal advantages. The US government doesn't really control what happens in the states, but it does control the border with a powerful volunteer military. The federal government maintains Washington's infrastructure and military through taxation of the other states. The level of taxation is based on how prolific that state is and what they can afford. Next, let's look specifically at the states. 24 years after the cataclysmic event of the collapse, most states are busy making their own way in the world and thumbing their noses at Washington, D.C. State governments are all quite different depending on where you are. In the South, they remain unchanged. In the Pacific Northwest, actual elections take place with real campaigns and candidates. Most small towns, however, become isolated areas suffering in an ecological wasteland. Some fell to the ravages of marauding nomad packs, while some were wiped out by the wasting plague. Others were destroyed by droughts and obliterated crops, farms, homes, and businesses. Out of the small towns and cities throughout the US, around 70% have been abandoned or destroyed. The result is the America of today, a few largely dense packed urban areas surrounded by ecological wastelands, ghost towns, agricorp farmlands, and abandoned suburbs. This has led to the creation of three distinct types of urban environments in old cities, corporate cities, and new cities. Old cities are very similar to a late 20th century city. They happen to have a mayor, a city council, school board, and committees. Some old cities like New York, for example, are more corrupt and flooded with racial strife, internal warfare, and a paralyzed government. San Francisco, on the other hand, is relatively untainted, well organized, and efficient. Old cities have a mix of old and new buildings, factories, and shopping centers. Some old cities are kept unbelievably clean, whilst others are much more of a hell on earth image presented by the Euro media. Corporate cities are cities whose governments and municipalities broke down during the collapse. Powerful corporations moved in to fill the void and provided police, fire control, and medical services. In some cases, corporations openly run the city, and in other cases, a corporation controls the city indirectly and finances certain political candidates to push their own agendas upon them. Corporate cities tend to be clean and crime-free within the inner city, as the corporate elite like things to be perfect near their immediate living areas. Where corporations don't have a stake or care about an area, the result can be a burned-out battle zone or a nice family neighborhood, depending on the residents and their access to weaponry and firepower. When the corporations aren't able to control the entire city, they sometimes resort to a zoned corporate city. This breaks the city into heavily controlled areas with checkpoints and guards patrolling perimeters. Chicago is a good example of this. New cities are very much a mix of old and corporate cities. They're characterized by modern building, urban planning, and well laid out streets. This doesn't guarantee the population's safety, however. Night City, for example, was planned as a model city, but when its visionary designer was murdered by organized crime, it rapidly degenerated into an urban nightmare and one of the worst cities in the early 2000s. Let's take a look at how the world of 2020 has changed since the event of the collapse. Some cities like Detroit and Chicago are fortress-like with their neighborhoods broken into walled zones and patrolled by armed forces. Others like San Fran and Denver are clean, pleasant places with a big tourist industry. In these cities, the buildings usually tell the story of how well off they are. Old city buildings include degrading mausoleums of brick or concrete. New city buildings are modular steel and glass constructs spearing out from the streets below. Both styles are cluttered with aerodyne landing pads, solar collector panels, microwave dishes, generator fans, rooftop gardens, and automated weapon pods. Every US city has a combat zone where law enforcement is non-existent and gang-on-gang violence takes place. By Euro standards, most places in the US have all modern amenities such as video stations, cell phones, aerodyne vehicles, biosculpt parlors, and cyberware. Whatever you can find in Paris, you're likely to find in Night City. The level of technology in America is monumental. Huge video boards, monster ad blimp clusters, pedicabs, cyberbikes, and hologram screens screeching out the latest headlines. Weather-wise, the acid rainfall percentage has been steadily dropping. As more cars are converted onto CO2 and methane, the poison fogs that previously enveloped American cities are now less common. American cities in 2020 live and die by the gun. With much more conflict, strife, tension, technology, gangs, corruption, and violence permeating through the world, being armed at all times is natural. An armed society has new rules, and in certain parts of many cities, there are designated free fire zones where weapons can be used freely to settle disputes. Urban shootings for self-defense are so common that a new device has been added to weapons. A gun camera is standard issue and takes a picture of what the gun's pointing at when the trigger is pulled. In court, a gun camera photo of your victim holding a weapon at you can get your case outright dismissed. If he was a threat at all, the gun camera will convey that image. Thanks for watching, guys, and for everything and anything Cyberpunk and Cyberpunk 2077, join Neon Nation by subscribing to the Neon Arcade. I also wanted to add that if you guys want to follow me up on my socials, it's twitter.com/theneonarcadena, the Neon Arcade NA on twitch.tv, and on Instagram at the Neon Arcade. I'm most active on Twitter, so if you guys want to communicate with me, make sure to follow me on that platform.